Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Last year I did a video about different writers who came up with very similar ideas independent of each other and then went on to do different executions of it. And I've encountered another example of this. Over the weekend, for the first time, I finally got around to watching Passengers, which was a late 2016 movie with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence. There's a generation ship traveling through space, and it's got thousands of people on it in hypersleep, and something goes wrong. One guy wakes up, he's stranded by himself, and he's got some questions to answer. I never saw it in the theater, like I said, but I want to say back in 2019 or so, I heard of this book that had been out for a while by Josie Russell called Caretaker, and I decided to pick up the book. And it was fine. It was very similar in concept to this, though. In the end, I found it kind of didn't deliver on the concept that it had promised. The ending was a little bit more, we'll say, like pulpy space opera superhero type thing, whereas in the beginning, like, it had something really interesting to pitch. It just didn't quite get there. The premise is that there's a ship on a 50-year hypersleep journey, and was it supposed to be 50 years? There was one guy who was supposed to be awake for most of it. He was going to be an old man by the time it got there, and it sucks because, well, let me explain correctly. This ship was supposed to have one person stay awake the entire time. He was going to be the caretaker. It was his job to repair things if anything ever went wrong. But once everybody was getting all set up, the caretaker was getting the last person into his hypersleep pod, and then, like, the caretaker had a heart attack and died. And this other passenger, Ethan, wasn't able to get into his pod. The ship wouldn't activate it for him. It's like, there needs to be one person awake, and now it's you. And he's like, oh, this sucks. Especially because his wife is also in hypersleep, and she's pregnant with their first kid. They were going to start over on a colony planet somewhere. Well, he's about 5 years into this journey, and like, he's kind of reconciled himself to the fact that he's going to be, in his 70s when the ship gets there. Well, 5 years into the journey, one of the pods opens up, and a female passenger wakes up. She was the girlfriend of the caretaker. I don't know why 5 years had to pass, but they had planned on spending the journey together, on their way to this new planet. If I recall correctly, this book was also like Christian chick fic sci-fi, so there was a very uncomfortable element of, are these two people going to end up romantically entangled while this guy is literally still married, but his wife is in a sleeper pod? Like, it was trying to ask a complicated moral question about that. It didn't really address it in a substantive way in the moment, though. It just kind of danced around it awkwardly until something else happened. Again, like, the pitch and the concept and the idea here, there was something strong there, but then it ended up going in a really campy direction. When they hit like the 5 or 6 year mark in their journey, Ethan and this other woman, they find out that their ship isn't headed to the planet that it was supposed to be headed to. They've actually been sent to a different planet owned by some alien empire as a slave tribute token sacrifice thing. This empire is already aware of Earth. They want to conquer the entire thing. Earth's military is like, no, we want to fight you, but we don't have the power to, but we can go completely scorched Earth if you don't leave us alone. But tell you what, we'll give you one ship full of people that you can use for labor, and you leave us alone. And the aliens are like, okay, we agree to this. Again, challenging, high stakes, big moral failures in there. Like, there was grit, there was teeth, there was all that stuff. But then when they get to the planet, like, Ethan meets the aliens and he gets like psychically shocked or something and ends up with telepathic lightning powers, and he fights the aliens and saves the human hostages and blah blah blah. In the end, like, his wife wakes up and they're having marital problems. It's like it didn't deliver on the strength of its concept. And if you check out the reviews, like, I gave it 3 stars just because it did some things well, it just didn't get there. And I tend to be a little bit more generous as a reviewer. A lot of people like really didn't like the execution on this. Now, it's not like Josie Russell went and watched Passengers and said, I can deliver on that better. Because, like I said, this book came out in 2015, and Passengers came out over a year later. In my perfunctory internet search, I found out that Passengers had been kind of in development for like 10 years. Like, the original script had been pitched and shopped around. I guess the initial leads that the studio wanted were Keanu Reeves and Emily Blunt, which both of those are fantastic, talented actors and probably could have done the part well. But after seeing it, I was like, I'm glad they got the two actors that they did. They both just executed and delivered on this. This movie was right in between Guardians 1 and 2 for Chris Pratt, so he was still riding high on that initial wave of people seeing him on Parks and Rec, and then he goes on and does a superhero movie and does it really well. And Jennifer Lawrence had just wrapped up the Hunger Games movies, so these two actors were very popular in the mid-2010s. In fact, if I read right, she got paid more than he did to appear in this movie. Similar premise, they're on a generation ship. This time they're on a voyage that'll take 120 years. Sorry, generation ship is the wrong word. That's where people stay awake and they just keep having generations of offspring. It's a hypersleep ship with 5,000 passengers on it. But while it's traveling through space, it gets hit by some meteors, and one of the pods malfunctions, and Chris Pratt wakes up. His character's name is Jim. And he's a lower tier passenger, blue collar, tradey. He's there to be a mechanic and a builder and stuff. And he can't figure out how to get back into his pod and get it to operate. Like the pod had to be set up in a factory or something on Earth. Like you couldn't just get in and out of it. And even the ship's AI is like, no, it's not possible for you to be awake. He's like, well, there's 90 years to go and I'm screwed. So he's stuck in complete isolation for a year with only the ship's AI and the robot bartender to talk to. And the bartender has a little bit more intelligence and leeway than the ship's AI, but he's still got limitations. And so really it's just Jim in isolation until he stumbles across Aurora's pod. Aurora is the female lead, finds out she's a writer, and he starts watching recorded interviews of her and like reads everything that she ever published, and he starts to fall in love with her. There is the element of the fact that he's alone and he's isolated, and that she's beautiful. It's more than just like, oh, I want to not be alone and I want to wake up like this one hot chick that I found. Like they did some work in the script to give it more substance than that, and he grapples with the decision whether or not to wake her up. And in this isolation, he gives into that temptation, and he ultimately does wake her up. And they spend a year together before she finds out that he woke her up deliberately. And then they're fighting with each other, and not like him fighting with her. Like she hates him and is like screaming at him and like even beats the piss out of him in his sleep one night, and he just takes it. Like he knows what he did was wrong. But the question kind of gets addressed in a different angle when a third person wakes up, a deck chief on the ship who's able to get them into like the command centers and stuff. And Aurora talks to the deck chief, Gus, and Gus gives her this explanation. He's like, when a drowning man is drowning, he'll pull other people down with him in his frantic effort to survive. It's not right, but he's drowning. When you're in that situation, different rules come into play, and it's kind of the man in the arena theory. Like, the opinion of the man drowning is going to fundamentally be different than that of those who are comfortable and have oxygen. And finally, this thing gets turned completely on its head when they have to go out and repair the ship, and Jim faces mortal danger, and Aurora suddenly faces the prospect of being alone for the next several decades. And she, once she faces that choice, she realizes, she's like, I can't do this alone. I can't do this. I can't be on the ship without you. And it's a fantastic character piece. There are beautiful set pieces. Like the set construction was wonderful. The casting was very limited. There's maybe half a dozen characters in this movie, and that's it. sound engineering, score, and all that stuff for what it's worth is fine. It's shot like two beautiful people on a cruise liner, but it is also like a fantastic science fiction piece, a good space epic, and they've got to deal with the challenges of being out in space. I'm not going to spoil how it all ends, just that it's, man, like this is a movie that asked a lot more of the audience than a vanilla sci-fi piece or a vanilla romance piece. Like there were challenges in here. Like this story and this idea and this execution, all of it had teeth, and I appreciate that. But it didn't just throw it out there and say like, okay, make up your mind how you feel about this. Like it took the characters somewhere, and the audience was along for the ride in a fantastic way. The final thing I want to mention in this is if you're familiar with the Lore podcast, I believe it's also a show and everything. I want to say it was October 2019. They did an episode about sailors who were stranded and marooned during the heyday of British sailing in the 1800s and had to resort to cannibalism to survive. There were a lot of interesting peculiarities and coincidences in a couple of the stories that they covered. You remember that movie Life of Pi? Like the tiger was named Richard Perkins or something, and like it turns out the tiger was named after a couple of guys that were famously like surviving sea cannibals. Anyway, I'm getting out of the weeds. The main point of this is that there was a legal mechanism that they sort of nebulously referred to as the law of the sea that allowed stranded and marooned sailors to not be charged with murder if they had to resort to cannibalism to survive. And just because of that understanding that if you're stranded out in the ocean and your choice is between like this or dying, unfortunately a different set of morality comes into play. To some extent anyway. Like they'll take in the extenuating circumstances when analyzing the right and wrong of this question. There was one specific instance though in that Lore episode where they talked about a couple of guys that were stranded for years and had to survive off of that at one point, and when they got rescued, like while they were out, the law had changed and they were being tried for something that was legal when they did it, more or less. Like I could be misremembering it. But the point is, this Passengers movie, the concept it was tackling was a lot like that. What is the morality that applies to a stranded sailor? And it's easy to say from your place of comfort what you would do in that situation, and objectively, you know what the right thing is. But your opinion is extremely likely to change when you are in it, when you're in the soup, like when you're going through it. It's not going to be the same as when you're comfortable. Anyway, fantastic movie. Only real content warning. There's some mild profanity, and you get to see Chris Pratt's butt a couple of times. There were some bedroom scenes, but like they didn't show anything. PG-13 and such. But man, like from the script to the casting to the performances to the execution, like you feel Jim's despair at his isolation. You really feel Aurora's rage when she finds out the truth, and when she gets isolated and she starts to break down and she feels what Jim felt when he was isolated in the beginning. Like Pratt and Lawrence 100% delivered on what the script demanded of those characters. So fantastic movie. I can't say necessarily that I recommend Caretakers the book. It kind of tackled a similar concept. I just wasn't a fan of the execution, and the ending wasn't my favorite. It'll work with a certain audience. It just didn't work for me. But definitely check out Passengers. As at the time of this recording, middle of April 2025, it was free on Prime, which is why I finally got around to watching it. But I would probably grab a DVD of that for my library eventually. Anyway, drive safe. See you out there.